Hi and welcome to another episode of eCom at One, and today's guest is Tony Brooks. Now, Tony is a qualified psychologist, leadership coach and speaker. Works with a lot of brands locally and internationally, empowering leaders to gain confidence, clarity and control. And more importantly, is a fellow Prince obsessive like myself.
That's the most important piece, Richard, really, about all of that, yeah.
And also very much a trusted advisor to our group of companies here. I've worked with Tony personally for getting up to sort of 10 years now. So we do a lot of sort of leadership work with our management team and myself with Tony. So how you doing, Tony? You okay?
No, I'm very good, Richard. As I was saying, I'm back recently from a wet and windy week in Norfolk, but we're all having to adjust our holiday expectations during 2020, aren't we? So
yes, I
mean, all good.
I think it's a bit of a difference from last year's. I think you did about, was it 5 weeks in the States last year? Was it a year before? And then you had
Yeah, 3 weeks in the States, yeah, and what have you. And and I was also supposed to be out in Switzerland with one of my clients this month. And then I got back from holiday to find that Switzerland's now on the no-go travel restrictions. So to try and rework all that or work with them remotely. So yeah, it's
I think that's
challenging time for us all.
Isn't it just? I think that's, going to be this is a bit of a different podcast today, guys, that are listening in. Obviously, we do a lot about the different aspects of running an e-commerce store. We look a lot at the technical side and the sort of the creative and the, driving business and sustaining a business through these tough times. But today, we're going to have a very different slant to a lot of episodes. We're going to talk about a lot of things around leadership, mindset, which I think are just so important at the moment. Obviously, we're sort of 6 months plus into the pandemic, COVID-19, and the impact that's had on business owners and the teams that work with the businesses. So I think let's get straight into it. How did you become a leadership coach, Tony?
Yeah, well, I'm going to cut a really long story short. My background initially was IT, actually, technology, and then eventually got into team leadership positions and what have you. And I was at a company that most people have heard of called Experian, based in Nottingham for 10 years, and went on 2 senior leadership programs, got sort of more senior positions myself, and was studying psychology all through that time, and just became more and more fascinated with how to support, help leaders and help people really develop their, as you say, not only their skills, but their mindset. So I got the opportunity to take redundancy 13 years ago, and decided, as I was on 12 months notice, that was a really good opportunity to set up a business. And my coaching business has changed over those 13 years. I've changed the brand and it's changed paths a bit, but fundamentally I really enjoy working with people and helping them get the best out of themselves as leaders and get the best out of their people.
Fantastic. And so what would you say makes a good leader then, Tony?
Oh, there's so much in that, isn't there? And there's so much we could talk about. I actually think there are a few things I would focus on. I think an important part of leadership is getting your own ego out of the way. There's a great book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, where they did research on the most successful leaders, and a lot of them were found to be more introverted in nature. I know you're an introvert, Richard, although many people who meet you might not think not.
Yeah.
But I think it's that ability within leaders to help their people and actually empower their people, and make it more about their people, because the people are pretty much the ones on the front line dealing with the clients. And it shouldn't really, I think if you're going into running a business or a leadership position based on fueling your own ego, I don't think you'll be as successful as you might be if you make it all about the people that work around you. So a good leader for me, a lot of it is about communicating well with your people, bringing them into what's happening with the business. And I know you and I do work together, but I know you're very good at sharing your strategy with your people and getting ideas from your people as well, because again, there's a whole wealth of experience and expertise in your people. And so good leaders will recognize that and not only share a strategy with their people, but allow their people to have input into that and change the path and look at things like culture. I remember, again, we did a piece, Richard, a few years back where your team were involved in that, looking at what the SEO Traffic Lab eCom One brand was all about and the culture. I think that big one about communication, though, I think it's keeping people aware of what's going on. I mean, particularly through the last 6 months, I think companies that have done it well, especially with the remote working, have been communicating well with their people, and that can be on a one-to-one basis or on a team basis. And the final thing, sorry, Richard, no, I'll let you speak then.
No, you're fine. Go.
I was going to say just one final thing as well, because it was interesting actually. I got a call last week. I was on holiday, asking if I'd go on Nottingham Radio to talk about leadership, and I couldn't do it because we were out and about that day. But it got me thinking, because I know what they wanted to talk about was the amount of U-turns that have gone on with the government, especially over sort of last sort of few weeks.
Yeah.
And it's one of the topics I've talked about a lot over the last 6 months. I think a good leader must always display agility, but particularly over this time as well. So
yeah.
the concept of agile runs through software development,
yes.
but it's a really important part of leadership. It's being able to think quickly. The pace of change is getting faster and faster, and it's being able to respond to that and change direction and make critical decisions. And so that agility, I think, is important. And some things that there are some things I think the government have done that would be a little dubious as why that U-turn happened. But actually, admitting you're possibly on the wrong path and changing is mature leadership as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
So getting used to change, getting used to dealing with change, sort of encouraging that communication with your leadership team, making sure that everyone's sort of updated as best you can on sort of what's happening. But as you say, things have over the last 6 months. There's never been so many changes and big changes, big disruption. As you say, communicating what the plans are, what the intentions are. But obviously that could change literally. You plan one thing and then a week later, as we know, as you know, in our business, 6-7 months. We were like, right, we're all going home for, I think it might be for a couple of weeks, maybe. No, I think it might be for 3 or 4 weeks. So take all let's get everything out and, and we'll see you in a few weeks sort of thing. And then, we were sort of 4 months before we were back in. And obviously that inherently a lot of change, we implemented with your help, a lot of strategies around comms and supporting the team and obviously the management, et cetera, et cetera. So,
but you did really well in that you preempted, if I remember correctly, you made arrangements for all the team to start working remotely even before the lockdown, didn't you, Richard? And I think you were one of those shrewd people who preempted what was going to happen and got your team in place and ready before the official lockdown hit,
Sure. Yeah, we were probably about 2 weeks before the official date. Yeah. So, what would you say to the guys that are listening in that do have a team? They have a team, maybe, a smaller business with half a dozen or, 50, 60, 70, obviously we have a whole mix of e-com stores and business owners that listen to the podcast. What would you say would be some ideas that they can, takeaways that they can look at implementing and to think about around motivating their own teams and creating what we talk about as a growth mindset or the growth mindset culture within the business?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a number of factors around that, I think. I'll start with something simple, which I think a lot of leaders can neglect, to be fair, and not maliciously. I think it's just a lot of leaders are very busy, but I think taking time out to recognize good performance and doing that on the spot. I've been in companies before I was coaching where it was said that the senior leaders were only really seen them when there was a problem. So I think making sure that you take that time to do that. There was a piece of research, I know you and I were talking about this recently, actually, done by a psychologist called Marcel Lasada, and he looked at the typical balance of positive to negative sort of feedback for people, and it was around about 1-to-1 really. So you're going to need to pick up on things that people don't do so well, but you need to pick up on things they do well. And he found that to get more of a high performing team, you're looking at a ratio of around about 3-to-1 up to even 6-to-1. So it's, as a leader, I think it's finding much more time to to speak to people, notice when people have done things well, and ensure that other people alert you when other people have done good work on a project, so you can go over and actually congratulate them or thank them. And again, make it make it more specific about what they've done and all those kind of things. So that's one part of it. I think it's there.
Yeah, it's be a tricky one, can't it? Because absolutely, it's so important. But then, as a leader, manager, owner, you get busy. But then you've got to come back to that. Well, you're not going to go anywhere unless your people are happy. They're producing. They're working as a team. So it's just making sure that the communication that you have with them isn't there when you've got to talk about a problem or a situation or a discussion that is a piece of work that maybe just needs a bit more support. It's also recognizing the good work that they're doing throughout, which I think even more so when you've been working. Obviously, a lot of people still working from home and have been working from home for a long time. It's so important for that positive feedback. I totally agree. Yeah,
it is. But the balance, I would say as well, and this may seem like a strange one, we're talking about motivating, is to actually deal with underperformance as well. Because I think one of the things that can demotivate a group of people is when they see underperformance by certain individuals, but it goes unchecked and not dealt with. And so that can be demotivating, because I think people can feel they're putting the effort in, but other people aren't, and it's not getting handled. So I think dealing with that quite clearly as well. I mean, as you said as well, you touched on the idea of a growth mindset, which comes from psychologist Carol Dweck. I think having a business that appreciates that mistakes are made as well, and mistakes are part of growth. So I think you don't want people making repeated mistakes, but getting people, I don't think you want a culture that's based around fear of making mistakes. I think you want people to try things, make mistakes, but then also have some time to reflect on and review why it didn't work, why the mistake was made, so people get the learning from that. And that's all part of that growth mindset piece that you picked up on. But I think also having that shared culture built around what is the purpose of the organization, so people really know why you're all getting up out of bed every day doing what you do, the difference you make to client, society, whatever your sphere of influence is, but really understanding what it is you're about. And then also those collective values, which everybody knows, and looking at the behavior of people, so it's in line with that, and you get that consistency. I think that can be great for motivating as well, because I think it's just, we all like to be part of a really successful team, don't we? And a team that's aligned and moving in the same direction and all those kind of things. So that's another part of it. I think those things. The one final thing I would mention as well, and again, this is becoming so much more important now, is encouraging and finding time for innovation and creativity within your team. And there was a book I was reading recently called Leadership is Language.
So many books, Tony. I think we're going to have about 5 books already in the show notes, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I just thought this one really good idea to share, actually. So a lot of the time when a leader gets a team together to discuss maybe a new product idea or solving a problem, they may start the meeting by saying, this is my idea on what we could do. What do you guys think? And basically the concept in the book was that encourages what's called more convergent thinking, i.e. the ideas tend to narrow around what the leader has said in the first place. But if you're having a meeting with your team to discuss, I don't know, creative ideas for a new service or product or what have you, ask them to submit their ideas before independently, so they don't get that influence from the leader, and then you get more what's called divergent thinking. And that's something definitely I thought it was a great notion, actually, but encouraging people to think more. I know that the old classic phrase about more out of the box, but it is about them thinking more broadly, rather than feeling that they need to say something that is in line with what the leader is already thinking on that.
They're getting sort of, right, well, the boss thinks this. What do you guys think? Oh, well, I better jump on that ship, because I think I see it. I've seen a lot over the years, different people in different businesses I've been involved with, where you get a very strong character, rightly or wrongly, and then it's quite easy for the associated team and the people that work in that team to sort of jump on that, rather than have their own ideas. And when they do have their own ideas, it's then just imperative that the way that those ideas are discussed and not sort of pushed to one side because a stronger character, has
Yeah.
got a stronger voice, is dominating the environment and the sort of the team or the project team. Yeah, the sort of dynamics of a team and the way that you discuss a new idea. Such a good idea. It's such a good one, Tony. Yeah.
I thought it was I thought it was just a great little snippet, but I think in broader terms, just encouraging innovation and not stamping down ideas, and that whole thing where having a culture where no idea is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Get people feeling much more confident bringing forward ideas and knowing that some won't work.
Making
There's
it a safe space to come up with
yeah,
ideas and
yeah,
discuss. And obviously, if there's a larger team, might not use everything, but you're going to be heard. It's going to be discussed. Yeah.
yeah,
Great. So,
yeah,
what
yeah.
would you say is one thing that stops people from achieving their goals, Tony?
One thing that stops people from achieving their goals. If it was to be one thing, I would say.
We'll give you one to start, and then maybe a second.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to be one to start with. I would say people not fully buying in to the importance of the goal and what it's about and why it matters.
Yeah.
Because I think that I know you're very familiar, Richard, with SMART objectives, which is SMART's been used as an expression around goal setting and objectives for a long time. But I think one of the things that SMART misses is, does the goal or the objective have something inspiring in it? Do people understand what it's about and why it's going to make a change for them, make a change for the business? So I think I'd probably say that if it's to be one thing, I think that people not fully connecting with the goal or objective and seeing what it's all about and seeing it in too much of a mechanical way or a matter of fact way rather than really fully connecting with why they're going to do it and what it's about.
Yeah. And then if you could have one more, then.
Oh, I think as well, actually, sometimes it's a probably similar thing, I guess, is I know you're really good at this because I sit on some of your appraisal sessions and I know you do this really well, Richard, but I think sometimes leaders can almost just deliver objectives to people without having people's input into what they think they should be doing. So I use the expression co-creating objectives because I think it's good to say to the person, what do you think in your role is important for you to be working on? I've got some ideas on maybe 5 or 6 objectives for you the next 6 to 12 months. But what about you? What's going to be good for you in terms of your development on your career path, and what do you think I may be missing in terms of what I'm setting you? So I think it is that co-creation between the leader and the person they're working with to help them
together, discussing, agreeing together. It's the input from both sides rather than just this one. There's a real thread on this podcast, isn't there? Here, where it's very much involving the team rather than barking orders and instructions at them, which quite often is where a lot of the challenges I think in a team. And when you're building a team, I think a lot of our listeners are scaling businesses, predominantly in the e-commerce space. When you start out, typically it's one man in a bedroom, as a lot of businesses, and we've got many of them, that are doing now, multiple millions a month. But it starts out with that one person, doing everything. But then the reality is you then bring on your first maybe picker or packer to pack the orders because you're and then it's, then you bring on your marketing person, your warehouse, and so on and so on. And obviously that then needs a leader or a business owner to lead and adapt. And it can be challenging, So I think very much a lot of good takeaways already, where it's very much working together with the people, and trying to agree together things. But obviously you're the owner, so you have a probably a certain direction and bigger ideas, but not bigger ideas, but ideas about the future and scaling. So it's, again, when you're discussing those, I think with the team, you're there, it's given them, they see the bigger picture and where they fit and where they can go and where they can grow. That's what I like to try to do, is sort of say, well, we're working on this particular project. We've always got a lot of projects here and sort of individual projects that all all our team, as you know, have like personal development projects, actual physical projects, you know, and then we get our team together and they get to see, and we discuss with them, you know, our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. And then they can see then where these side projects, sub projects fit into the strand of, you know, whether that's developing a department, developing a series of events, whether that's, you know, around our recruitment process and the sort of people we're looking for. Why are we looking for them? Well, if X, Y, Z happens in the next 6 months, we're going to need a head of X, you know. And I think you just get a lot more buy-in, a lot more enthusiasm in a business, because they can see, you know, they're more likely to stay with that business, I feel, because they see more of a future rather than just well, we're just doing this and I'm stuck here doing this thing. They can see, you know, what the potential progression is in the business as well, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's a good point there, because I think it is about a leader giving a sense of direction. But
yes,
then I think it's a leader having being humble enough to know that there's a lot of good ideas in the teams, you know, and allowing the team to influence that direction as well. But yeah, I think people want to see, you know, people in an organisation want to see the leader's got an idea of where they're going, but
yeah.
they'd like to be able to influence that path as well. Yeah, I think it's that balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important. You know, you don't really want people coming into your business. I don't think that you know, you really want people that are going to stay, you know, in a business. You want to invest in them, and they invest their time in your business, you know. And so I think you just have a better relationship with your people, you know, with your team, you know, if you sort of invest time in them, you know, as a management team. But I think that's usually the challenge, is the time, you know, is that sort of that excuse of, well, yeah, I was supposed to have a meeting with such and such to go through such and such, but we didn't, you know. So I think it's just so important to schedule that time and create that habit of,
Yeah.
you know, of spending the time with the key people in your business. You know, it's, you know, I have sort of 3 things in my business that I know I'm responsible for, and that's the number one. You know, but
Yeah.
it's took some years, to be fair. You know, I know, you know, we're on quite a growth trajectory, can I say it, in our businesses, you know, and it's so key that, you know, the key people and the team, you know, are on board and are, you know, enjoying the journey with us as well. So I touched on habits there. So what
Yep.
do you say, you know, how important habits are, and what are some of the habits that leaders should be thinking of, and be aware of, to have a successful business and be successful as a leader?
Yeah, well, routine's important, isn't it? And I mean, I don't know about other people, yourself and other people listening to this. I'll be honest. I think the last 6 months, at times, I lost particularly the first couple of months, I think I lost my way with a lot of the good things. Because I know you and I, Richard, have talked in the past about having a good way to start your day. Which for me can be a little bit of reading, some Tai Chi, some exercise, you know, all those kind of things. I'm a regular swimmer, so I've not been doing that for 6 months. I'm planning on trying to get back into the pool this month now. So I think having a good way to start your day actually is fundamental. I also, one of the pieces of it, this sounds simple, but one of the pieces of advice I'd say to anyone listening to this is, well, I'm going to talk about planning in a broad sense in a second, but daily planning. And for me, having a plan done the night before for the following day has been something that's been such a good discipline for me, because I start every day with an idea of what I'm looking to do. I think some leaders can end up just going straight to their email, see what's come in. But I think having a daily plan is a really important habit as well. I would say some of that routine stuff we're talking in the morning should be about physical and psychological, because I think we all get the notion of the fact that if we don't look after ourselves physically, you know, with diet and exercise, that things can go wayward. But same for your mind, really. If you start, I mean, again, one of the bad habits, if I'm honest, one of the bad habits for me has been spending too much time looking at the news over the last 6 months. And if you're constantly feeding your mind with, I mean, yeah, I think you want to know to a degree what's going on, but I think we probably all become a bit obsessive with the news. So it's being mindful of that daily routine and what you do, the good habits and the bad habits, and it's making sure those bad habits are kept in line and what have you.
A lot of things there, Tony. I think, you know, being mindful looking back on the days, like you say, did you have a good day? Did you have how did it start the day? Do you know what? I start the day cracking, and I think 9 times out of 10, not always, but 9 times out of 10, you start the day well, you end the day pretty well. And I think that's the great takeaways there. Where planning tomorrow, today, before you go to bed or before you leave the office, depending on and then starting the day well on the sort of health side, which I think working from home has definitely been. We're not saying we're up at 5 doing the 5 things and everything 20 minutes, and it's challenging. It is challenging, isn't it? And that's where it's really pushing through. Trying to stick to those habits, get back to those habits that maybe you had more so when you had that different routine.
Yeah,
definitely more challenging working from home. Obviously, a lot of people still are, working from home, whether that's 1 or 2 days a week or full time. So obviously, a lot of businesses that are listening in are I've still got people working from home. What sort of advice would you say to employees who have got team members that are still reluctant to come back to work or a bit concerned about coming back to work? Is there any advice you can give those guys?
Yeah, it's a delicate one, isn't it? And I've had this issue coming up with some of the clients I've worked with, both in the UK and Europe, over the past sort of, I guess more so obviously the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, the advice I've been given is, first of all, is that we have to accept that everyone's anxiety levels are different. And what we might perceive as, not being so much of a problem now, some people may still be highly anxious about that. So I think we have to understand that everybody's anxiety levels are different is a starting point. And then I think doing I remember you posting on LinkedIn pictures of what you'd done with your offices before you started coming back, but doing the health and safety audit and procedures and making sure that you put things in place for people. So again, that starts to alleviate some of those anxieties. And one piece of advice I gave a company in the UK recently was, if you get people who are resistant, be patient, because what you find is that as other people start to going back into the office and things start to settle, then their anxiety again starts to lessen about joining the rest of the team. And I know that's in a way slightly treating people differently, but it's that understanding, and then allowing people to start to see all the team members are back in, and it's
potentially a staggered start, so many team and then so many more, and obviously the teams are talking to each other. Some are in, some are still working from home. Talking about the experience, the sort of precautions and the safety measures that are actually in place, not just on a document from HR. They are actually in place and they are being adhered to, and the distancing is manageable. So community.
And I know you did. I remember again, you did that well with a couple of people who are more in the vulnerable category, and so that's you staggered things and all that kind of thing. And I guess to be honest, then ultimately though, if you do everything you can that's reasonable, and that you actually need them to be back in the office but they're still resisting, then unfortunately it probably is best to just start to get some HR advice on how you resolve that situation, because there's got to be some understanding both sides here, hasn't there, that if people are needed, maybe not 5 days a week anymore, but if people are needed to be in the office as part of what they do, and you've done everything that's acceptable and reasonable to make it okay for them, then maybe that's where you get some advice on how to resolve that between the two parties, the company and the individual, really.
Totally. And I guess, obviously that, there's a huge wave of companies and different e-commerce stores that, a huge proportion of their staff will not be going back and may not be going back for foreseeable future. A lot of office space, in some instances, ending leases and terminating leases and letting their team decide or, work from home more. We're definitely seeing more of that. We are back in our offices. We're very fortunate. We've got a lot of space and a lot of space to grow. But obviously not everyone's in that position and don't want to come back, and they agree with their teams. I know a lot of I've got a friend of mine who's got 800 staff. over 5 floors in a capital city in the UK, and he's got 5 floors. And I think the last discussion I had with him, their lease is up in, they're growing as a business, doing very well. So they're still recruiting, and they're in one of the sort of fortunate industries, but they're reworking things, and they're going to renegotiate their lease and not renew certain elements. I think they're going to go to 3 floors, so sort of 2/3 of their team are going to work from home. But obviously, working from home, what sort of advice would you give around sort of keeping the I know we've touched on it already, but sort of to keep the team productive, to keep the team sort of collaborative and working together? What sort of advice can you give to those that are still going to be doing the remote thing, whether that's the whole team or a lot of the team?
Yeah, I think again, a lot of the good sort of, I guess, behaviours and whatever that are part and parcel of being a business when you are all sat in the office together. They don't. I think sometimes we feel when we've gone to remote work and we start to lose sight of those, but they don't necessarily need to go. So, having a probably even more frequent communication, having more. I know you did that, Richard. That having more regular communication with the team collectively, but then also with individuals, and actually as well, not just in a formal sense, but probably just checking in with people more. One of my companies, I was on a call with this morning from the UK. One of the directors recently just did a bit of a tour around people's houses, obviously speaking from a distance outside, but just a nice check-in to see how they're doing and what have you. So all of those kind of things, but not losing sight of things like the agreed culture of the business and how you behave, and making sure that you maybe go back and look at the values for a company, because with remote working, it might if you're going to be doing long-term remote working, it might be need to look at what those values mean in a slightly different way, but not losing sight of them, but thinking about, okay, so how does that value now manifest itself when we've got everybody working from home? We still want to keep that core value as an important thing, but maybe we need to think about the way we behave, to keep in line with that. So doing all those things so you do normally, having, we're so fortunate, aren't we, now with things like I'm working on Zoom today. It's so easy to pull your team together, and I remember actually joining one of your Zoom meetings and what have you. But looking at the strategy and keeping people abreast of what's going on, and all can still carry on just in a different.
So lots of takeaways there. I think things you can bring the team closer than ever, which we've seen in a lot of clients. And I think as a company, I feel that some of the different departments in our business, they're tighter than ever. They are better personal relationships than ever. I saw a certain team went out for lunch yesterday, which they don't do that often because they're different groups, but the guys that were in went out yesterday and had a nice lunch together. And you can just see the personal relationships flourishing more than ever, which is so key, I think, in a business. That ultimately you're coming to work, or even if you're working from home still, that those relationships, you're spending the majority of your working day or your life. If you're somewhere for 5 years, they are the people. Your family, friends outside of work, absolutely, but you're spending whatever 35, 45 hours a week, depending on where you work, with these people. So I think we've definitely, as a company, become closer as a team, sort of individual relationships. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. So being a good leader, obviously, has sort of been the topic, very much so, of the podcast. But who would you say are some good real world examples of effective leaders that have demonstrated strong leadership and grown and shown sort of a good sort of role models who you think are good to look at and aspire to be like?
I think some interesting characters over the years, just to draw out some simple pieces really, is Steve Jobs, not universally liked, and some of his behaviour is strange, but one of the things I took from him, I read a book called Insanely Simple about the Apple culture a few years ago, and I think Jobs was very, and you look at it with the Apple products, the way they're packaged and everything, he had a real focus on keeping things simple. I think the tendency for us to overcomplicate things even more now with technology, I think a great leader can bring back simplicity. And I
Yeah.
mean, he's not the only one, but that just because I remember reading that book about him, and the culture that they developed at Apple, which I'm guessing has been sort of prevalent since losing him. So I think simplicity, but I think we can definitely overcomplicate things. Obviously, if you look at Bezos with Amazon, that's amazing what they've done. I was talking to somebody recently about this. I remember when Amazon started and it was just about buying books, wasn't it? And you just think what they've done now. And so that operational side of it with Amazon, they've I mean, they're not perfect, but they've worked so hard on the way that they operationally deliver a service to customers. Amazing, really. If we were to have been asked 10 years or so ago and say, this is what will be happening, with drones delivering parcels the same day outside your door or wherever it might be, So him, I think for me, I know these are some famous ones, but Richard Branson has always been an influence for me in a couple of areas, really. One is that fun's always been a big core value of his. He likes to do things that are fun and enjoyable. And I think bringing some fun to the working environment and doing things that are fun is important. And he's always been, again, he gets criticism, but I think he's always looked to serve his people well and do well by his people. Again, nobody's perfect, but I think that. And a person I'm going to throw in as a final one, actually, because I was watching a documentary on him yesterday, is our hero, Prince.
Hey.
Because I think it is that bold innovation as well. What was fascinating about this documentary was Prince was making music available on the internet in advance of Napster, Spotify, whatever. He was trying different models where he was giving away albums with tickets for concerts. It's how he got his album Musicology to #3 in America, because they had to change it after he did that because he got away with it. So he was a fascinating character in the music industry and was always a step ahead of what was going on. And that takes courage, because I think it's doing things that have got an element of risk. And I'm going to flatter your ego, Richard, as well, because I think that we always talk about all these famous characters, but I think what you've done over the years, and especially over the last 12 months, you took some really bold decisions to move the team to a new city, a new office. Again, recently, through all of this that's going on, you're out there looking for 3 or 4 new people. You've shown, I think that, again, that sort of courage to make big decisions and know that, because I think we all know it may not 100% work out. But it's having that courage and boldness to actually do some big things. And I know you've got great ambition. But again, what you've always tempered it with is, I know you very well. We become friends as well, Richard, haven't we? But you're the amount you care about your people as well. I think if you can balance that, I think that's perfect, isn't it? I think if you've got a leader that's ambitious, got ideas where to go, but they don't do it, without taking due consideration and care of their people, that can happen. And on the flip side, I think you can get some leaders who are great with their people and don't necessarily have that sort of direction and that boldness in moving forward. So some famous characters, but seeing as you're the person interviewing me today, and I know you very well, I just sort of pick up on that.
Thank you for that, Tony. I think it's the first podcast where I think I've nearly had a little tear in my eye.
Sorry about that. I know you get emotional.
Some great, obviously some great different angles there. Simplicity, service, innovation, fun. A lot of the sort of the go-to leaders, inspirational leaders that a lot of us are aware of, and obviously there's a lot of books and whatnot that those guys have written, which brings us on nicely, I think, to my final question, Tony.
Before we move off, just before we move off that really quickly though, I think when I started a business, you almost think you need to find one person as your model and follow them. And some people do that, don't they? But actually, I think what I've tried to touch on there is that you can find things to admire and model in people unique things from different leaders. And actually, we were having a bit of fun there with the Prince one, because you and I are both big Prince fans. But it was a serious point, because you can look outside of business. You can look at sport. You can look at music. I mean, there's a brilliant book called Legacy, done all about the All Blacks and the culture there, and the way that they led and changed the culture of the All Blacks rugby team, which I'm not a rugby fan, but again, it was a fascinating one. So I think for us all, look outside of what is our normal sort of business zone, and find other people who can inspire us in different ways as well.
Yeah, fantastic piece to end on there, Tony. I think some amazing nuggets in the whole podcast. This will go live on Monday, so we will not be messing about with this one. Get this straight out there. Final question then, and we always like to end our podcast on a book recommendation. Now, I think you've rattled off about 7, maybe 8 already.
Sorry.
You're going to pull back on one of those and hard spotlight that. But if you have to pick one book for the listeners to read and to spend some time helping them maybe with their leadership, or obviously depending on where you want to go with it.
Okay, I'm going to jump. I wasn't going to say this, but I'm actually going to say it now. I'm actually going to recommend a book by Eckhart Tolle called New Earth, and he's also done Power of Now as well. But I was actually going to mention another book, but I'm going to stay with that one, because although it's not a business book, it was transformational for me probably 7 years ago, because it was the very simple thing, just quickly, that I didn't have to be controlled by my thoughts. That I was something above that. It was quite a revelation to me. Even though I've studied psychology all over the years, I think it was that liberating moment reading his book, where you start to appreciate there's a level of consciousness above our own thoughts, and we don't have to be gripped by our thoughts and follow them down some dark paths sometimes, and all those kind of things. That's gives us all as individuals immense power. So I would say Power of Now and New Earth. If people haven't come across them, and
I would back that up as well completely.
Have some difficulties with their thinking.
In the last 10 years, I've read twice the Power.
Yeah.
New Earth once. Yeah, amazing pair of books. So the guys that listen to the podcast, if they want to find out more about yourself, Tony, where's the best place to reach out and connect with you?
I guess probably, I've got the website, thetonybrooks.com and the leadershiptrainingworkshop.com, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. So people can find me on LinkedIn and connect, and I do quite a lot of regular posts on there. So it'd be always good. And obviously, if people connect with me on there, just say, I found you via Richard's podcast. It'd be nice to know. But those 3 places, but probably LinkedIn's the best one, really.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, pleasure.